Your jig setup is a very important part of catching fish on jigs. Now, if you missed it, I did a piece on jig colors, selecting the right jig color. You may want to check that out if you haven't. That can help you get in the right range. I also did another video on selecting the right jig. So now you need to make sure that you have the right setup. So here we are. I've got a couple different setups based on different types of jigs. Now, we established earlier there's different types of jigs. There's flipping jigs, like a full-size flipping jig, like right here. It's the Missile Jigs Flip Out. There are a bunch of full-size jigs out there on the market. Then there is the mini flip jig, which is a smaller, more compact, finesse style flipping jig. Still a flipping jig. You can cast it and stuff like that, but a little lighter wire. These are getting more popular out there on the market as well. And then you've got the little micro jigs, like this guy here. And as you can see, that's not on a bait caster. Spoiler alert. And then you've got the bigger offshore type structure jigs, football jigs. It's another category jig. So you got to have different setups for each one of these jigs. And since I've got it right here in my hand, I'm going to go ahead and give you the structure jig. Now this is the Ike's headbanger jig. It functions very similar to a football jig. So for this setup, we're going to have basically the same type of line, rod, reel combination. I throw these types of jigs religiously on bait casting gear. I'm going to have a 7 to 7.3. That's my preference of length and action. I usually go with a faster medium heavy rod or even a heavy action rod, because that jig is going to be making long casts. It's going to be that water is going to create a lot of resistance on the line because it's going to be so far from the boat. It might be 10, 15, or 20 feet deep under the water when that fish bites it, and then you've got to be able to pull up all the slack out of your line and get that hook set in there. So I like a little stronger action rod for this structure type jig, like the headbanger. I'm going to probably go to 16, somewhere between 16 and 20 pound Sunline Sniper fluorocarbon. I'll use shooter as well. I'm a big fan of the shooter. Either one of those fluorocarbons, but fluorocarbon is key because it can help you feel every little pebble, every little rock that jig comes over. So when old Mr. Bass comes over there and eats it up, you can feel it. Bang! It's like just telegraph down your rod. I've got a Cashin. This is a heavy action 7.3. That's medium heavy 7.3 action. But this rod's got a little faster taper, like I mentioned. And what faster taper means is it's got more backbone. It's a little bit stiffer, so it's more like a heavy action. So either one there, but that's the setup there. I like a bait casting reel with a faster gear ratio, at least a 7-to-1. This is a Daiwa Tatula LT 7-to-1. This is probably my preference. I mean, you just want a good reel with a pretty good. If you only have a 6-3-to-1 reel, that's okay. That's okay. But I can tell you, when you go to picking up that slack and trying to set the hook, you want to make sure that you have as fast as reel as that you have around. So that's that. Now we're going to move over to the mini flip style jig, and again, this is the medium-sized, so to speak. It's not a full-sized flipping jig. You can see the difference there in the size profile and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to be using that on a 7.6 medium heavy rod. That's what I like. Medium heavy rod, 18 or 20 pound test. I'm not going to go more than 20. It just, for casting reasons, you just don't need it. The hook diameters on these types of jigs are not super huge. You don't want to be using braid with this combination. You really don't need braid in that combination, but I'm going to do that 7.6, but a medium heavy flipping stick. It's a Cashin 7.6 medium heavy flipping stick. It's probably my favorite all-around flipping stick. I can get away with this one rod with almost anything in the flipping and pitching category. Again, that 20-pound Sunline shooter is what I'm going to use there. And again, the same Daiwa Tatula LT reel, 7-to-1 or even an 8-to-1, because with this type jig, I'm going to be making precise pitches to cover, laydowns, skipping it up under docks, putting it in, overhanging trees, put it up under there where those bass are going to be hanging out. And I'm going to put that type of jig in those precise spots. So I want to have that heavier line so I can get them out of there. And then I want to have that 7/6 flipping stick so I can have enough energy and torque that when I set the hook, I can navigate them in and out of that cover. That is a big deal for that type of jig. That's the setup I like. You can absolutely get away with a 7-foot or even a 7.3 if that's all you have, but a minimum a 7-foot. 7.3 is a bigger advantage. 7.6 gives you a ton of advantage, but with that 20-pound test and that smaller, more compact jig, you don't want to go to a heavy action rod. That's the one thing you don't want to do. You don't want to have too heavy of a rod because you get excited, you get a bite, you hadn't had a bite in 2 hours, you get excited and you just absolutely crank on them, and when you do, just snap. I don't care what line it is, you got too heavy of an action rod, you're going to have bad results. So that's that on that one. If I'm going to go to the full-size jig, I can use the same exact setup as I did with the mini flip, but I can upsize my line if I feel like I need to. If I'm going to heavier cover, if I'm fishing one of them places like Lake Fork or some place that I know's got 5, 6, 7, 8-pound bass in it, I'm gonna put that 20 to 22 to 25-pound Sunline shooter. I'm going to upsize that line there. I can still get away with this same rod, but with that heavier line, you can move up to a heavier action rod. If you want to go to a heavy action 7/6 rod, by all means, do it. If you have the ability or if you have the rod available, that would be good. A 7-foot rod would definitely need to be a heavy action if you're going to go to that heavier line and that bigger jig. It's got a bigger, thicker hook on it, so you really need to put some wood to those fish when you get a bite so you can get a good hook penetration with that thicker diameter wire. 7/6 is about the minimum. If you're going to go, or 7.3, if you go to that 7.3, medium heavy is a minimum. Medium heavy to a heavy action rod, you should be just fine. So there's one more jig. There's one more rod. Look here. It's a spinning rod. What is a small little jig doing on a spinning rod? Well, this is the Ike's micro football jig. There are a number of other finesse type smaller jigs. When you're using a jig that's this size, I mean, this is almost a Ned rig type size jig, but don't confuse it with a Ned rig. The action functionality completely different, different on these micro jigs. When I'm using a micro jig, it is 100% on a spinning rod. And look at this. It's actually got it written right there on there. Micro jig rod. Huh, how about that? That's a casting rod that I helped design, but the whole deal is 7-foot to 7. This is 7.1. I wanted just a tick more than 7-foot, but I didn't quite want to go to 7.3 because I still do a lot of sidearm skipping and fishing in rivers and things like that with a little micro jig. But that is definitely a spinning rod deal. I do the Daiwa Tatula ballistic reel. It's a reel I've been fishing with the last couple years. Amazing reel. Tatula reel, spinning reel, just fine. You want to get the best spinning reel you can afford, but that's not a huge deal. The biggest deal to me with this setup is having the right action rod. You want a medium, no more than a medium heavy. You don't want to go too heavy, but I like a medium fast. If I can have a preference, medium fast, that's exactly what this rod is. It's got more backbone, but still a real soft tip, and then you've got that braided line backing. That is a big deal for me. 12-pound Sunline X Plasma braid, that's my braid preference. There's some other good braids out there, but then you're going to want to have that line there, that leader material, 8 or 10-pound. 8's probably what I use most of the time. If I'm around cover or something, I'm a little more concerned about that. I might bump up to 10, but 8-pound, man, you can put some big fish in the boat with 8-pound leader. Usually do about a 15 to 20-foot leader. That's usually kind of how it goes right there for me. And that's the setup for for the micro jigs on a spinning rod. Yes, you can catch some big fish, especially smallmouth and spotted bass. Micro jigs, a lot of fun. And you know what? I've caught some 4s and 5 largemouth with those little jigs. There's something about that little jig, that little bushy dude down there bouncing around. You might want to try that if you haven't. But those are my jig setups for the different types of jigs. If you have any more questions, do not hesitate to put something down there in the comments, question-wise, and I will do my best to answer it. And if you have any more suggestions for new ideas on more videos, I'd be glad to hear those as well. So thanks for watching.